This video is brought to you by Skillshare. The first 500 people to use the link in the description will get 2 months of Skillshare Premium free. Portugal the Man could have never predicted Feel It Still to become the astronomical hit that it did. Over 150 million views on YouTube, 400 million listens on Spotify, it won a Grammy. That means something, right? It was the most Shazamed song in the country for 7 weeks running, and that's because if you're still listening to the radio, you would have heard it across nearly every format. It was a crossover hit, a song that transcends genres, so widely accessible you can play it on nearly any contemporary radio station, and it just works. It was the group's first chart-topping single, going on to conquer the top spot on 6 Billboard charts, and almost 2 others, taking Portugal the Man from indie darlings to top 40 giants in just weeks. And these charts are important. Labels use these rankings to entice radio stations to play songs even more. You see, stations need to retain listeners to keep the advertising dollars coming in, and the best way to keep people listening is to play the biggest hits around. It's why you hear the same tracks on rotation all day long. The more a track plays, the higher that rank goes up, and the more that single sells. And the loop continues until listener fatigue kicks in and is replaced by something new. Since 2003, there have only been 12 songs to top 6 or more Billboard charts, including Feel It Still. You'll see some familiar names from frequent hitmakers, but only one of these songs has topped the same 6 charts as Feel It Still. Gotye, somebody that I used to know, actually outdid Feel It Still by charting a 7th airplay chart. Either way, the 2 tracks are the only hits to top the alternative songs chart, while also topping at least 5 others. So what do alternative artists need to keep in mind when trying to compete alongside pop stars like Pharrell and Adele? What does it take to make it onto the Billboard chart? Is there a formula for making a radio hit? Well, audio engineer and professor David Tuff took nearly 1,000 tracks that charted on Billboard's Hot 100 from 2014 and 2015 and broke down all of their components. Here's what Tuff found and how the 2 alternative hits stack up. Song intros would allow radio DJs to talk over them and intro the song, but in today's digital age and with attention spans shorter than ever before, music needs to grab the listener in the first 60 seconds or they'll tune out. Spotify requires you to listen to a song for at least 30 seconds for it to count as a play, so it's essential that a track hooks you with those first few seconds. And artists seem to get that, which is why over 80% of Hot 100 tracks had intros under 20 seconds long. The average was just 12 seconds. 13% of tracks jumped right into a chorus or hook with no intro whatsoever. Songs like Pharrell's Happy waste no time drawing you in. So it's not surprising then that Feel It Still's intro is bang on average at 12 seconds long. Gotye's track, on the other hand, is 19 seconds, above average but still in the majority. And you'd be pressed trying to find a hit song with an intro over 20 seconds. Try counting next time you hear a radio song. Ever wonder why most singles are about 3 minutes in length? It's because 45 RPM records could only hold about 3 minutes of music per side, and it's what most radio stations after the 50s played singles off of. So if you wanted your music to play on the radio, you sent in what could fit on that 45. And since capacity is no longer an issue, song lengths have increased slightly over the last few decades, as 3 minutes and 44 seconds was the average song length for the Billboard's Hot 100. More than 2/3 of tracks fell between 3 and 4 minutes. Typically, anything longer than 4 minutes either doesn't play on most stations or is accompanied by a radio edit, cutting it down for time. Feel It Still is a minute shorter than average, sitting with the other third of Billboard's hot tracks. Gotye's was above average at just over 4 minutes, but there was a radio edit that cut it down to 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Tracks with tempos at 80 beats per minute chart nearly as frequently as those near 140 beats per minute. Songs with faster tempos are generally considered to sound happier than those with a slower one. But the danceability of a track is important in determining what becomes a hit song. There also seems to be a strong positive relationship between a song's tempo and how long it stays on Billboard charts. The average tempo sat at around 116 beats per minute. Gotye's track fits in with the majority with a tempo of 129 beats per minute. While Feel It Still rebels traditional radio tempos and goes for the lower end with 79 beats per minute. If you want to make it onto the charts, you've got to use a relatable archetype. Subject matter that resonates with listeners, allowing songs to bring meaning to their lives. The lover archetype is by far the most popular, with 62% of songs that focus on matters of the heart. Somebody that I used to know is the perfect example, even upping the ante with 2 different points of view, making it even more relatable. But Feel It Still fits into the outlaw archetype, a category only used by 6% of tracks. Male vocals dominated the charts, being featured as the lead vocalist in 67% of tracks. Females only led in 22% of songs, and duets made up the other 11%. A third of songs featured a collaboration between artists, like what Gotye does with Kimbra, but Gotye is the only writer credited for his track. When it came to songwriting, only 5% of tracks had one sole writer like that. Both rock and pop averaged about 4 writers per song, while hip-hop and R&B both averaged just over 5, so the notion of ghostwriters might just be the norm. Portugal The Man credits 10 writers for Feel It Still, but half of those credits are just band members, and another 3 are to credit the song that they sampled. So co-write your songs, and if it wasn't already obvious, put the title of your track in the lyrics. Only 4% of songs did not include the song title in their lyrics. The more often a title is repeated, the more memorable it is to listeners. But too many repetitions can also be off-putting, so a balance is needed to keep listeners interested. The average number of song title mentions was about 12. Gotye uses the full song title 6 times in this track, and partially another handful of times. Feel It Still has 8 mentions of its title, but the hook, I'm a Rebel Just for Kicks, has 9. It's becoming more difficult for rock artists to climb Billboard charts, and their best bet seems to be to play down the rock aspects of their music in favor of a more pop-friendly sound, an approach acts like Imagine Dragons and 21 Pilots seem to have taken. Pop was the most prevalent genre for all songs found on the Billboard Hot 100. It has been for more than a decade, and these songs generally favor the standard pop structure of intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. Feel It Still follows the formula fairly closely with the addition of a pre-chorus after the bridge. Gotye's track is the one to divert here, with 2 verses before the first chorus, which is surprising since most artists are usually trying to get to the chorus as quickly as possible. Gotye doesn't mind taking his time building the anticipation. Portugal The Man falls into the average when it comes to intro length, songwriting, and song structure. Gotye was slightly above average when it came to intro and song length, tempo, and also falling into the love archetype. What this tells us is that there's no formula that will guarantee you a radio hit. Aside from maybe a danceable tempo, Tuff's data failed to prove that there was a strong relationship between each component of a song and how well they performed on the charts. A lot of what Tuff found seems to just be general guidelines that artists have been following for years. All of these are just things to consider when songwriting. The process is different for every artist, and following these guidelines doesn't mean you'll chart the Billboard Hot 100. If anything, you'll wind up with a fairly average track. Only once an idea comes to mind should you start trying to alter and structure your music. Frontman John Gurley wrote Feel It Still in under an hour. He stepped aside from mixing the album for a quick break and started playing a bass line. Then Gurley started improvising in one of his favorite tracks. And it quickly became the melody. Gurley grabbed a mic and started singing a line he had stuck in his head for a while.
Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now.
And that was it. Sometimes it's just that easy. But making a hit song is more than just trying to replicate the components of what you hear on the charts. It takes expertise in music theory, mixing, and production to really make your music come to life. If that's your dream, I recommend Signature Sound's mixing music class. They've produced for bands like U2, Fall Out Boy, and Blink-182, and they have a full class on how to mix a pop rock song, just like Portugal The Man's and Gotye's. You can find the class on Skillshare, an online learning community with thousands of classes on everything from production to theory, where you can learn from real audio engineers and industry professionals. Use the first link in the description to get 2 months of Skillshare for free, so you can create that chart-topping hit today. Thanks for watching, ladies and gents. Thank you, patrons, for the tremendous support. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like rating, subscribe to learn more about the music you love, and that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and keep listening.